Alright, what's up guys? New deck profile today. It is for Tenyis. We've got a new support card. It's called Heavenly Dragon Circle. Basically, this card allows you to tribute a worm on your side of the field, and then it allows you to add a worm, or if you tributed a non-effect worm, it allows you to special summon that worm. So this card's very good because it lets you basically cycle out a bunch of really good Tenyi monsters like Vishuda onto the field, or Adhara, or basically any of the ones you don't have, like a Shauna in your hand. So it basically puts a bunch more Tenyis onto the field and into the graveyard. And its second effect is also really good because you can banish this from your graveyard if you control a non-effect monster, and then you can add a Tenyi spawn trap card from your deck to your hand, which is really good. I'm sorry, not a Tenyi spawn trap card, but it's a Tenyi card you can add to your hand. But most of the time we'll be adding a Tenyi spawn trap card. You can only use one of those effects per turn. Sometimes you'll actually go for the first one. Sometimes you really will just go for that second one. But both effects are very good. Another good thing with this card is you can actually combo it with the what's her name? With Shaman. You can just discard this with Shaman and then get a free card right afterwards. But this card's really, really good. It actually helps the deck a lot. I'm not even sure why it's a common because it's so good. But let's get started. We play 3 copies of Tenyi Vishuda. Now, if you don't know how to play Tenyis, what they basically do is if you control no effect monsters, or basically your field's empty, you can special summon a Tenyi for free. On top of that, all Tenyis have a secondary effect that either happens when either you control a non-effect monster, or when there's something happens to your non-effect monster, whether it gets attacked or it gets destroyed. In the case of Vishuda, if you control a non-effect monster, you can balance a card on your opponent's side of the field. Play 3 copies of Shathana. This one, basically, if one of your non-effect monsters gets destroyed, you can special summon that non-effect monster back and then pop your opponent's monster. Then we play 3 copies of Adhara. This one's actually one of my favorites because it's a tuner on top of other things. But basically, this one you can banish from your graveyard, and then you can add a Tenyi or any worm from your banish pile back to your hand. And actually, if you have a copy of Adhara in your banish pile, a copy of Adhara in your graveyard, you can actually banish the graveyard one to add back the one that is banished, because technically you can't return the same card, but you can return the same card's name. So then we've got 3 copies of Ashana. This one is, again, one of the better ones, because this one you can banish from your graveyard if you control a non-effect monster, and you special summon any Tenyi from your deck, and then you're locked into worms. But it doesn't matter because this is a very worm-centered deck, and it only locks out special summons from your special summons of non-worms, but you can still normal summon any kind of monster you want. And we play 2 copies of Tenyi Spirit Maputra. This one just if a non-effect monster you control is targeted, you get to banish and then negate and destroy. And then we play 2 copies of Nahata. This one basically just if a non-effect monster battles, you can banish this from the graveyard, and then the non-effect monster gains 1500 attack. But it's pretty good basically. I'm sorry, not gains 1500 attack. The monster actually loses 1500 attack, your opponent's monster that's battling. Then we play 2 copies of Mare. This card basically allows you to special summon 3 tokens, but the reason this card is so good in this deck is you can't special summon this card unless you special summon off the effect of a worm, but the Shaman actually allows you to special summon it for free. So you basically just discard the Mare, and then you can summon the same Mare you just discarded, and basically you get to summon 3 tokens. This card by itself will make all of the any of the extra deck cards in the Tenyis. It can make the Saharasa or the Berserker or any of the others. Like this card by itself is like a 1-card length 4, and in this deck you make it so easily. Sometimes you can even, like, let's say you have a very monster heavy hand, you can actually just special summon 2 Tenyis and then just tribute this, and then you can go. You don't even have to worry about being locked out of non-Tenyi or worm summons or something like that. You straight up can just summon this, go into a link 4 like a Boral Sword or something. But this card is extremely good in this deck. You definitely got to play 2 because we are playing the pot of Desires. It's not even a problem seeing in your hand. A lot of people complain about it and say you should play one, but honestly, seeing in your hand is really not that bad because you can actually just discard it, like I said before. All right, next we play 4 more monsters. These are actually can be adjusted to your liking. So we play Light and Darkness Dragon, Vanity's Fiend, Vanity's Ruler, and Majesty's Fiend. So these can actually be adjusted. You can actually, instead of playing these 4, I recommend you play 4 of these Tribute Summon Floodgate monsters, but they don't particularly have to be these 4 in this order. So you can play like 2 Vanity's Rulers and 2 Vanity's Fiends, or you can play 2 Light and Darkness Dragons and 2 Majesty's Fiends. But the thing is, these monsters are very, very good in Tenyis because Tenyis have absolutely no normal summon. The best case scenario is that you summon one of the little Tenyis, like as in your normal summon, but the majority of the time you will actually not normal summon in this deck. So you can just, as your last effect, or as the last thing you do in your turn, you can just tribute normal summon Vanity's Fiend. So you'll have like a pretty decent board of just Tenyi monsters. Maybe like the Tenyi Link 4, maybe the Tenyi Link 2, the field spell, maybe a counter trap, something like that set up, and then you just tribute summon Vanity's Fiend, or you tribute summon Light and Darkness Dragon, or Vanity's Ruler, or Majesty's Fiend. And you basically sit on like a normal monster, or a non-effect monster or 2, and then a Vanity's Fiend, or like I said before. But yeah, these are the 4 different options that you can play. You don't have to play a variety like I do. I'm just trying to show you the full like range that you can play. Most of the time when I do play it, I usually play 2 Vanity's Fiends, and most of the time I actually just play the 3 Vanity's Fiends, but the magic number seems to be 4, so you can do the Light and Darkness Dragon and the Vanity's Fiend. But like I said, these are your options basically. All fairly good. And then we play 3 copies of Ash Blossom. It's the best hand trap. This deck has so much like space. What's good about Tenyis is that they're extremely consistent. That's the number one thing about them, is their consistency. They may not put up the most explosive boards, but they are very consistent. So we play 3 copies of the Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring in the deck. Next, the spell cards. We play 3 copies of the new Heavenly Dragon Cycle, like explained in the beginning of the video. You can tribute any worm and then special summon a worm from your deck. If the monster you tribute is a non-effect monster. That's also, this is a quick effect, so this can help you OTK very easily. Like you can just tribute a worm and then get an extra attack. Like you can tribute summon Vishuddha and then attack for an extra 1500, which can help. Or even better, you can just summon the Ashana, because Ashana is 16 and Vishuddha is 15. So you contribute and then get basically an additional attack. On top of that, like I said, it fills the graveyard with Tenyis, and of course it has that secondary graveyard effect, which is also good. It helps you in the grind game because then you can start searching things more and more and more. The graveyard effect's already pretty sick, but that secondary effect really does help. Then we play 3 copies of Vessel for the Dragon Cycle. Basically, this allows you to send a worm from your deck to the graveyard, and then if you control a non-effect monster, you can also add a Tenyi monster from your deck to the hand. So basically you get to send and add. It's probably the best card in the deck, but usually what you're going to send is Mare to the graveyard, and you basically add whatever, but the majority of the time you add the Asana. But yeah, basically those 2. But yeah, it's probably the best card in the deck. It's a Foolish Burial, and it's a Foolish Burial, and it's a search card in one. I mean, you can't really complain. Then we play 1 copy of Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi. This is basically their field spell. It makes it so non-effect monsters are completely unaffected by everything, and on top of that, when your opponent special summons while you control a non-effect monster, you get to draw 2 cards. And you've seen our deck. It helps us draw into hand traps, more Tenyi, stuff like that. I used to not play this because it just wasn't worth it, but now that you can search it, you just play the 1. I think it's very reasonable. Then we play 3 copies of Pot of Desires. The great thing about our deck is we play so many 3-ofs that it doesn't matter what we banish. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Even those like Majesties and Vanities monsters, it doesn't matter if we banish those because we have 4 of them, so we'll definitely get them later. But this card is probably the best draw card in the deck that you could possibly play, the only competing with Pot of Avarice. I might bump this up to 2 and the Pot of Avarice down to 2, so basically 2 and 2, but we'll see how it goes. Pot of Avarice is another really good card. But what you can do is, even if you have minimal Tenyis, you can just keep going into copies of Monks, and you can just fill your graveyard very, very quickly with Monks, and then you can draw a Pot of Avarice and just get them all back and draw 2 cards for free, because you really can fill your graveyard with this deck very easily, and you go through your extra deck extremely quickly. Then we play 3 copies of all new card, Triple Tactics Talents. This, of course, can be replaced with any hand trap, but I actually think this card is really good going first or going second, because going first, if your opponent hand traps you, you get to either draw 2 cards or take control of their monster, which they won't have because it's turn 1, or you can just shuffle away one of the cards in their hand. It gives you a bunch of information on their plays. So the going first, this card is very good, but it's also very good going second. And Tenyis generally, unlike a lot of other decks, can always go second. Like, even if you build it like I did this particular deck to go first, unlike my previous going second Tenyi decks, you can still actually always go second in Tenyis because they have things like bouncing and destruction and protection. But yeah, this card is actually really, really good in the deck. From what I've tested, it almost always resolves. And then we play 1 copy of Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi. It's a searchable counter trap. All you need is a non-effect monster. If you have a non-effect monster, you basically win, because it negates stuff. You'll have like a non-effect monster, a Vanity's Fiend, and if they try to get rid of the Vanity's Fiend, you just activate the counter trap, and usually they don't have more than one answer for a Vanity's Fiend. But that is it for the main deck. Now let's go to the extra deck. Play 1 copy of Boxia. Basically, Boxia just helps you shuffle things away. It's really useful. 1 copy of Draco, Berserker of the Tenyis. This guy helps you OTK because he gets he gets 2 attacks on monsters, and on top of that he gains attack when he destroys one. But he's very good, and then if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can banish that monster, which again is fairly useful. Play 1 copy of Abyss Dweller, because as you saw, we play a decent amount of level 4, so going into Abyss Dweller is easy enough. 1 copy of Tornado Dragon. It's actually a worm, and it has some random weird synergies. You can summon it even after you use Ashana, and you can still use this card after you use Ashana. And basically, one other cool thing is you can actually return it from the banish pile with that Hara, which is another cool random thing. Next we play 3 copies of Monk of the Tenyi. You need this. This is like one of your main play starters. Basically, you summon any of the Tenyis, turn them into a monk, and then you can special summon another one from your hand. You need to have 3 of these. It's absolutely imperative. You cannot play without 3 of them. And like I said, this card is really good with Pot of Avarice. We play 2 copies of Shaman in the pure build. You can afford to play 2, maybe even 3. This card is very good. It's one of your playmakers. You basically discard any card and special summon any worm from your graveyard. You can even summon one of the bigger Tenyi Link monsters if you really wanted to, but most of the time, like I said, you want to try to special summon, especially if you're setting up for the first time, a Mare from the graveyard, because Mare summons a bunch of tokens. It's really helpful. Also, if one of your non-effect monsters battles, when it declares an attack or is attacked, you can just pop a card on the field for free, which is also useful. So play 1 Draco of the Master of the Tenyi. Basically just allows you to if he's the only monster, if he's the only monster on the field, and the only other monsters on the field are non-effect monsters, you can destroy monsters on your opponent's side of the field equal to the non-effect monsters in your graveyard and on the field. So most of the time you'll be destroying like 2 or 3, but nice non-targeting destruction. 1 copy of Berserker. 1 copy of Sanhara, basically just summons a token and then gives you a bunch of protection. It's one of the cool fields that you can make as like a Sahara, a Vanity's Fiend, or Light and Darkness Dragon, and then like a token or something, or a monk, and then your opponent can't target the Vanity's Fiend and they basically have to scoop. Then we play 1 copy of IP Masquerena, just for tokens and stuff like that. 1 Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax, very, very easy to summon in this deck. Basically, 1 Mare will make you a Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax, and it'll be off of IP, so it won't be able to get destroyed. Also, IP is very good because it splits summons between 2 turns, meaning you summon IP, and then you can just, during your opponent's turn, Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax, and then You know, it kind of, just in case you locked yourself out, you still have the IP, you could just summon stuff next turn. And then we've got one copy of Appaloosa Bow the Goddess. Again, most of the time you'll summon it off of IP, it can be destroyed by card effects, and then it's a lot more difficult for your opponent to get rid of. Sometimes you can make like an Appaloosa, Vanity's Fiend, or even better, the Mech Crusader Avermax with the Vanity's Fiend, and then they can't attack it. And then, you know, you've got all the various Tenyi protections. But that is it. That is the all-new deck profile for Tenyis. Very excited about it. Very excited about playing it eventually. But thank you for watching.